Howdy, folks. I'm Jeff Gonzalez, former Navy SEAL, founder of Trident Concepts, and host of the Bulletproof Workshop powered by AR15.com, where we discuss knowledge, skills, and ability to help bulletproof your everyday performance in whatever your field or passion. Welcome to Podcast 035. My next guest is an original OG of Jiu-Jitsu in America, having trained for over 25 years and competed on an international stage. His humble upbringing set him on a path of success by enabling him to succeed through resourcefulness and determination. He discovered jiu-jitsu in its infancy while at college, where he studied mathematics, finance, and economics. Having an amazing competitive career, achieving all sorts of awards and medals, his focus now, or his legacy, is sharing his love for the art. When he's not on the mats, he is a high net investor, having started up numerous businesses and grown them to Fortune 500 scale, all while staying true to his belief that people are the focus, that people matter. He's an amateur disc jockey, pursuer of happiness, iconic investor, karaoke superstar, and extraordinary entrepreneur. Please welcome to the show, Donald Park.
Jeff, thanks. That's certainly the most unique introduction that's ever been given about me. And you really dig deep. You dug deep to get DJ. I'm certainly not a karaoke singer, but damn, DJ should have been buried deep in the annals of Google. But it's great to be on your guys' show. And listen, I appreciate it. I always appreciate, connecting with folks outside of jiu-jitsu and building relationships through that. So I'm excited to be here, man.
Well, I am excited. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I like to start the show off by helping our guests to kind of get to know the guest, helping our viewers to get to know the guest. And so we usually start by asking where you came from, where you grew up, where you hail from. And before I let you answer that question, we're going to take a short break to thank our sponsors.
New for 2023 from CMMG, the Compact Action Descent is now in 9mm. Their Descent line took portability to a whole new level, and now they've done it again. Available in 6.5 and 10.5 barrel lengths, this compact platform offers the modularity of the AR-15 while being compatible with a wide range of magazines and ammo. The soft recoiling radial delayed blowback system makes this pleasant to shoot and comes with the reliability that CMMG is known for. For more info, check out cmmg.com.
This is fun.
Where the hell did you get karaoke?
So I listened
because that's some racist shit, man. I've never sang karaoke in my life. I only rap. The funny thing is if you go to 4 nightclubs across the world, I think one's in, certainly one in London, one in Austin, and one in LA, there are microphones set aside for when I used to drink. I don't drink anymore. But when I used to drink, my favorite rapper is Notorious B.I.G. and I would get on the mic.
Yeah.
And I once opened for Chance the Rapper.
No shit.
He doesn't know this. But I did. Because we own this nightclub in Los Angeles called Bootsy. Oh, no, this was at Poppy. We have 2 nightclubs. And Chance was supposed to play. I was out in my kind of partying days and whatnot. And it was taking a while and 10, 20 tequilas in, whatever it is. And so I tell the DJ, I'm like, put on Biggie, give me the mic.
I love it.
And he looks at me like, first of all, I don't know who you are. Second of all, absolutely not. And third of all, why do you have the balls to ask me this? And I'm like, so I'm texting the manager and being like, guy owns the place or whatever. Yeah, I'm some hyperbole that's not exactly true, but not exactly not true. And so I get on the mic and I rap Juicy. I'm like, it was all a dream. And I'm in my mind, I'm like,
you're killing it.
I'm killing it. And then, 10 minutes later, Chance shows up. So I tell everyone, like, I opened for Chance.
Technically, you did.
Technically, it's true.
It's true.
Technically, it's true.
So I listened to a podcast that you did where you had commented about how I think this was like the similar story, but you referenced it as like your karaokeing. So that's where that came from.
Got it. That's where you got that. You did go deep. You actually listened to that other podcast.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I watched that one fight too. So So I tried to do my homework. All right, folks, we're back. So Donald, we were about to discuss where you grew up and where you hail from.
Yeah. So the short story is I grew up in Chicago and my parents are both immigrants from South Korea. They came over in the mid 70s. And I was born in Chicago. So Chicago proper. A lot of people hail from Chicago and talk about being from Chicago, but they're actually from the suburbs. So there's some pride associated from being in the quote, inner city, the rough and tumble inner city. But I grew up in Chicago. My parents are immigrants. I've got an older brother.
Nice.
And that's where I grew up.
So what time period? 70s, 80s, 90s?
You're trying to date me. I was born in 79. I'll tell everyone. was born in 1970.
So you were like an 80s kid. So you grew up kind of like your childhood was like 80s to 90s kind of time
Yeah,
period.
for sure.
Nice.
I mean, I didn't get out of the house much,
Oh,
to be honest
okay.
with you, but so I didn't really experience it. So,
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I heard about it. I read about it in books.
I read about it in books. Awesome. So life in Chicago's non-suburbs, but the actual city itself back then was pretty sketchy.
Yeah. So my upbringing, I always talk about having grown up in Chicago, but not knowing a lot about it. I went back to grad school in Chicago
No way.
in mid to late 2000s. And people always ask me, man, was it great to go back home? And it's a very different city, right? You know, going in the nicer, bougier parts of Chicago, to hang out in Lincoln Park or someplace where people use summer as a verb, or, brunch and all that stuff. I didn't know what the hell brunch was growing up. But no, my parents are I was very lucky in many ways, insofar as we didn't have a lot growing up.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know it. I mean, there was always that deep-seated fear of the bottom falling out constantly that a lot of immigrant kids kind of feel. But my parents worked really hard. My dad had, a couple of jobs. My mom worked. My dad put himself through school.
Wow.
His first job, I mean, when they came here, it was kind of it really is a remarkable story. So I have a lot to thank my parents for. But they came here and it was mid-70s, didn't speak the language.
Wow.
My dad had a reasonably successful business in Korea, and I didn't know this until my 30s. I sat down with him, similar to this, and pulled out an iPhone, which I would recommend everyone do. Right, go to your parents and get their story.
Yeah.
So I hit record on it, and
nice.
I was like, "What brought you here?" And he was like, "I had a plastics factory." He was a Marine, did 1 or 2 tours in Vietnam, stayed in country, hustled and built some business, got some startup capital, and built a plastics factory, I guess.
Wow.
And so I guess they were making like milk jugs or whatever you make in a plastics factory.
Yeah.
I didn't get that deep, but he did this, and it did really well. I don't know if this was for 10 years or 3 years or whatever it was, but he did pretty well. And then there was this kind of the oil embargo, mid 70s and whatnot, and turns out that the number one input for plastics is petroleum.
Imagine
and so the price of that went up, and I guess, with working capital and whatnot, he got upside down in his business. So he packed up my mom and moved to the States, and they had, I don't know, a couple $100, 2 suitcases. One was full of wedding blankets, which is kind of a Korean thing. And they had a hot plate and some chopsticks, and that was it.
Wow.
And, my dad, the story goes that he intended to fly to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but back then you could buy tickets kind of on layaway. I'll give you this amount here and then pay the rest. And they didn't get to Milwaukee. They landed in Chicago. So thank God. That was awesome. And so, and they lived in apartments with some friend of a friend. My dad walked every day to go find a job and started pumping gas at some pilot gas station and learned English riding a bus because there was another Korean guy there who apparently had a Korean English dictionary. So every ride he would get, he would take out a piece of paper and copy everything he could.
No way.
He put my mom through nursing certification. She became a nurse, and I didn't know any of this. I was born, grew up, and
did your thing.
Yeah, that was how it was. But I was really lucky because my parents kind of went through all that hardship.
Yeah.
And I had 2 tiger parents, very driven parents who really cared about education, and they did everything they could to get me and my brother into the right schools and do the right things. And, in some ways that, got so much to thank them for, but I was also really, really hard because there was not a lot of, the bottom was going to fall out at any given time. You felt the generational stresses of a set of parents who, left the country, were raised by parents who dealt with the Japanese occupation from 1911 to 1945. And only in the last few years have I recognized, oh gosh, my parents weren't assholes. Yeah. I had a very hard upbringing, like a very traumatic and challenging upbringing.
Yeah.
But not really their fault.
Yeah.
There's this thing called the transmission of generational trauma.
Yeah.
That kind of went down from generation to generation to generation. And my brother and I, grew up with that hardship, made us resilient. And hopefully my brother's got 2 kids. I don't have any, but he's raising 2 incredibly happy, beautiful young boys. And I see them and I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So anyway, to get back to the beginning.
Yeah.
I grew up in Chicago, was very lucky with, two hard parents and very unlucky with two hard parents.
Yeah.
And and then so I grew up there. I went to college on the East Coast.
Whereabouts?
In Jersey. I'll just tell you guys, I went to Princeton.
Oh, okay.
Anyone who goes to an Ivy League school, like you go to Harvard or Princeton, it's like, oh yeah, where'd you go to school? I went to school in Boston. It's like, okay, douchebag, you went to Harvard.
Yeah, everybody knows.
So when people ask, where'd you go to school? Jersey? Where? Central Jersey? Where? I went to Princeton. So I went to a fancy school.
Yeah.
And they did all the things. I learned how to use summer as a verb. I was a mediocre rower for, a couple years or whatever it was. And, it was the Rudy of everything, all effort, no talent. I got to that school when I was super young. I was horrible at everything. I got there when I was 16.
Wow.
I got to college when I was
Holy cow.
16, and I was right in the middle of puberty. So, thank you.
Wow.
Right?
That's a great place to be in that peak of puberty. Yeah. Something that you said that really kind of, I feel like you glossed over was that you have two tiger parents. We talked about that, but that to me was also really like you said, both I have very, very, I have good parents. That's both good and bad. And so when you said you defined tiger parents as like, and I can't remember exactly the words that you used. So how did you describe it?
Yeah, I don't know the exact term, right? But there's I think an Asian American woman who had maybe coined this term. I don't know if she was Chinese American or Korean American, but a really similar experience, right? A tiger parent is a parent who is incredibly strict.
Yeah.
Who understands the value of hard work and education, usually an immigrant who has raised their child because they know, especially in the 70s and 80s, they know that the only way to establish any security in their lives, the security that they don't have, because they're the immigrants, they've come here. Many of them are very well educated, but came here, can't speak the language, and they're taking menial jobs.
Yeah.
And it was really similar to what my parents had done, but they understand the value of education and how that's actually going to provide their kids with security. So you get this Asian American stereotype. It's like, actually, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
There's a guy named Johnny Kim, who's a Team 3 guy.
I know Johnny, yeah.
So there's this great meme on the internet with Johnny where it's like, okay, this guy's a University of California, San Diego math major, like summa cum laude, becomes a team guy, goes to SEAL Team 3, war veteran, comes out, gets into Harvard Medical School, becomes a resident, decides to apply to NASA, becomes an astronaut. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And father's still disappointed in him.
I've seen that one.
Yeah,
I've seen that one.
Yeah. And the kid's still, but the joke is that, I think about this all the time, but no matter how successful I've been, my mom still probably wants to reach out to me. It's like, hey, maybe go be a doctor. Like maybe go be a lawyer, go be something that's like safe and secure.
Are you sure you're happy right now?
For sure. No, but that's, that is the story. The tiger parents really drive for that safety and security through the credibility and the bona fides of education. So I had two of them and they were really great in that respect. But, my parents basically made a trade-off. And that trade-off was, I can either be incredibly hard and harsh and to ensure my child's safety and success.
Yeah.
And the price of that is emotional security, love, right? Whatever.
Totally.
Someone in the modern day and age would really think about. We didn't have the language for it back then.
Yeah.
But that was the trade-off.
Yeah.
And so they made a hard choice, which was, hey, do I want my kids to love me?
Yeah.
And be happy? Or do I want them to be safe?
Man.
And they chose the latter.
So that's a great point. The nature versus nurture. And like, I struggled with that with my two boys. The difference between how my ex-wife and I saw the rearing, I felt like more nature rooted in that sense for that exact reason. And she was a little bit more nurture. I mean, we had a little bit of both, but if you were to look at the majority of our perspectives, mine was more nature. And I thought the same exact thing is that I want them to be resilient. I want them to be safe, but I want them to pursue their own happiness because they have the right tools to do that. And that was, I think I got through to one of them, not so much the other.
You still feel the same way? Nature versus nurture?
That's a good question. I do. I do feel like because here's how I look at it. And this is a great point. At this point, like in your life, when you circled back with your dad to find his story, to get that story, that to me, that connection that you had with him made everything that he did for you worth it to him.
No, I'd hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, let me just be very candid, and I don't know if my parents will ever see this.
Probably
maybe
not.
they will, maybe they won't. Who
Yeah.
knows? I actually think that every once in a while, and I'll probably do this one day if I'm a dad, is they probably Google me from time to time. I'll get like the LinkedIn notification. Alex Park has viewed your profile. And I'm like, that's really sweet. That's really wonderful. Right. And listen, my parents screwed up a lot.
Yeah, of course.
As all parents do,
Yeah.
at least in the modern version of parenting. But
Yeah.
they really did it right. And I'll say, I would love to think that my father feels that I am so grateful for what he has done,
Yeah.
the sacrifices he's made.
Yeah.
And I would love to say that my mother feels that way too.
Mm.
But I'm also confident in saying that they don't feel that right now because I actually haven't gone back full circle.
I see.
I've had some conversations, but I have a very challenged relationship with
Sure.
my parents. When I turned 40, I'm 43 now, when I turned 40, one of the things that I told myself I would do in my 40th year was I was going to get healthy because I'd had 10 years of not training, not, at peak physical condition. I was really working too hard, not sleeping enough,
Oh God, that's killer,
partying,
man.
all that stuff. So I said, I want to get healthy. I want to make something healthy.
I
Right?
like that.
So I really want to take a relationship
Yeah.
that was fractured
Uh-huh.
and build it back. And I tried to have that be with my parents.
Sure.
And I'll talk about disappointment a little bit.
Yeah.
I was deeply disappointed in myself that I couldn't do it.
Mm.
And I beat myself up over that and I still do,
Yeah.
for a long period of time that I tried to reconnect with my parents and I couldn't do it.
Interesting.
And that's really hard to admit. But some of the work that I've done over the last, 7 years is to recognize disappointment is not a function of how hard you're working.
Okay.
It's not a function of talent, not a function of effort.
Yeah.
What it is, it's basically a function of expectation.
Yep.
So I was hoping to give myself a letter grade of an A. I want to bring my relationship with my parents to an A. I want to let them know how much I love them, how grateful I am to them. But there's all this challenge and trauma and language barrier and all these different things.
Sure.
And I felt like a huge failure for many years because I tried and I didn't even approach an A. What I needed to do, and I have some of that wisdom now, maybe some of that traumatic wisdom as I look back and I'm like, there's no way I could have made it an A. I should have recognized that I'm at a C- or C, whatever letter grade I'm at. And the best I could have done in that period of time was get it to a C. And so if I set that, I'd have felt better. And I actually look forward, and I hope I still have the time. My parents are alive, but I hope I have the time and the maturity to get there.
Yeah.
Is to go back and redo that one. Where I have been successful, though, on the make something healthy was right at that same time. I chose another part of my family. I have 3 cousins, 3 girls who I call my sisters.
Nice.
And I said, you know what, that's the family I'm going to choose.
Nice.
And I set good expectations there. And I was very deliberate about it. And I still am. And I have a deep, wonderful relationship with them that's been so healing. And I hope I can apply that kind of everywhere, but certainly with my parents before it's too late.
Well, it's always a challenge in that sense. I had a difficult relationship with my dad. I basically just one day I woke up and I told him that I was leaving for the Navy and I walked out the door and that was almost the end of it. So I had a difficult time with my father. And, over the years, we have reconnected in a way that I feel like is not just healthy, but also cathartic for both of us.
Yeah.
And, it was, it's also awkward because there is, why is this awkward kind of thing? Like this is my father. This is my family. This should not be as awkward
you
as
feel
it
like
is.
you should.
Yes, exactly.
And that should is so hard in life.
It is.
Like we should be close.
Yes.
Right? We should feel connected. We share the same DNA.
Yes.
Honestly, forget should.
Yes.
Should shouldn't be a part of it.
It's so true. And, that should is also that barrier that kept me from making inroads at trying to do it, because I kept saying, well, it should be easy, but it's not. So therefore I shouldn't do it. That's kind of how I approached it. So I got a little better at it. Time does wonders in many ways. In some cases, it's helpful and healthy and healing. And I think we've both kind of gotten to that point now where it's easier now because we both, I think, without admitting it to one another, acknowledge that it's awkward, and that I guess the elephant in the room now is not so big of an elephant anymore. So we can kind of manage things. So maybe that's helpful for you in that sense because, it was there was like a decade, almost a decade, and it's not like I avoided it, it wasn't out of anger or hatred or not loving them. It was just awkward.
Yeah, that's how it is. And listen, at the end of the day, it's we also have to recognize the person you are today is so fundamentally different than the child you were.
Oh.
And so when you're talking to your father, he sees you as a kid.
So true.
You see him as your dad.
Yes.
And all you want to do is be able to shoot the shit with somebody who shares DNA with you, who understands you better than anybody, but you just can't do it.
I have made every effort to do that with my son, and we do have a much better, and I've used the experience that I had with my father as a reminder of what I don't want to do with my son. And like I said, I my other son lives with his mom, so I don't get a chance to have as much influence on him as I would like. But my son that is here in Texas, we do have a much better. And I also think sometimes too that that as you both age, you move into different periods of your life, that you have different goals and different motivations and different hopes and desires.
Yeah, and you have different perspective.
That's the other thing, big time.
Yeah. I mean, I used to look at myself in the mirror and see my father in me and have that, just, oh God. But now I look at that, I'm like, yeah, I get that. That's
Makes
great.
sense. Yeah. So what would you say, obviously the way that your parents created the structure for you to be as resourceful and resilient as you were, was there anything else in your childhood that helped you to move forward as well as you did in your, whether it be college, whether it be business or jiu-jitsu, anything else from your childhood that was?
I mean, honestly, the only thing that my childhood was one thing. It was just pressure, just constant, unrelenting pressure.
Kind of like I felt when you were on side control. I get that. I understand.
It's a vicious cycle, my friend. It's a vicious cycle. I'm just trying to take the trauma that my parents put on me and share it with all the people I love on the mat and off.
That was an awesome 1 minute, let me tell you. So pressure, but what was that pressure for you to succeed? Pressure for you to achieve? Pressure?
Yeah, listen, it's a good question because I think about this a lot, right? So let me tell you how I kind of think about the phases of life.
Yes, please.
I think anyone, and let me preface this all by, I have zero original thoughts. I've stolen everything. Jiu-jitsu, business, life, everything. I've stolen from someone smarter or who's thought about it and whatever. So all I'm going to do is be a conduit and package it up.
Perfect.
I don't want to claim anything.
Good.
But the way I think about life is in three phases.
Okay.
Everyone goes through their achievement phase.
Yeah.
They go through their significance phase.
Yeah.
And then they go through their legacy phase.
I love that, man. And
the first 35 to 37 years of my life were all about achievement. And achievement can take lots of different forms. I also have, this kind of pyramid in my life now that I didn't have before, where I look at my life like the most important thing, the foundation of my life is health.
Yes.
So it's emotional health, mental health, physical health, right? You got to get that right before you can do anything else. You got to put the mask on yourself on the plane before you take care of the kid. Second thing is love.
Yeah. Love.
Self-love, family, friends, significant other.
Yeah.
The third is play.
Huh.
And I'm recognizing, I just realized about 3 weeks ago, I was listening to a TED Talk and talking to a coach. And I realized I don't know how to play. Huh. If play is defined, there's a guy, Stuart Brown, who's, I think, the head of the Institute of Play, which is kind of an absurd thing to think about, but it's so important for all mammals to play. And I think there's something like 7 or 11 types of play, but I don't know how to engage in any of them. But all play is defined by 3 things. It is unconstrained or all-encompassing. It is purposeless. It's pointless.
I love that. Yes.
And it's joyous.
Oh, God.
I don't know how to engage in that because of my upbringing. But so it's health at the bottom, love, play, and then work. And most people try to find love and passion. They try to find play and joy in work.
Uh-huh.
And if you were to design a product, an iPhone or whatever it is, you would not design your life the way that most people design their lives. Right? Most people look at their lives and they're like, a great product design is basically this. It's like, I'm going to figure out what this group of people really need.
Yeah.
Okay. iPhone. I need a phone that opens apps and makes calls or whatever it is. And I'm going to put something out there in the market. And I know it's going to be a piece of crap.
Yeah.
Like it's got to be good enough at the things that really matter, but I know it's going to be a piece of crap. But I'm going to get this feedback loop.
So,
right? This the Boyd's loop, the Udo loop. I'm going to get this loop and I'm going to have customers tell me what's good or bad about this thing. And I'm going to listen and I'm going to get it better. Release another version, another version. Then all of a sudden you're on the iPhone 14 and it's beautiful. And it's great. It's awesome.
So true.
It's amazing. But you need a feedback loop. You need to put things out there. You need to know that they're imperfect.
Yeah.
Most people design their lives the exact opposite way. They get no feedback. They pretend it's perfect out of the gate.
Yeah.
They don't listen to themselves or anybody else about what really matters in that pyramid of health, love, play, and work.
Yeah.
And this is all stolen from, there's a book called Design Your Life. It's written by 2 guys who were product designers and product managers, I think at Apple and IBM. And they were like, let's go apply product design
to life.
That's a great. And if you did it that way, you would recognize that most people treat their lives upside down. They expect work to do everything.
Oh, God.
And B, they think they're Tony Stark in a cave. They're like, I got a whole bunch of crap and I'm just going to weld it together and I'm going to come out and I'm going to be fucking Iron Man. It's like, it's awesome. This is great. But I'm not getting no feedback. And people are like, dude, your suit looks like a piece of crap.
Yeah.
And they, no.
Trust me.
How are you doing, Jeff? I'm great.
Yeah.
I'm great.
Yeah.
No, how are you really?
Yeah,
it's like, oh, no, my life's a piece of crap right now. I got to work on it, right? So in any case, that's how I kind of think about life. But achievement, significance, and legacy. So getting back to the question, the first phase of my life, majority of my life was really driven by achievement. It was really about, hey, the bottom's going to fall out at any time. If we screw up and we miss a bill, can't pay rent or mortgage.
Yeah.
If you get a bad grade, all the sacrifice is going to be worth nothing. You've got to do everything you can to basically go from a potential negative to 0. So achievement can be, I'm going from 0 to 1,000, or I can be, hey, I'm basically like in jiu-jitsu. So we're both jiu-jitsu guys, right? You can look at achievement a lot of different ways where it's like, hey, I'm swinging for the fences and I'm going to get a win.
Yeah.
Or I'm just avoiding the loss. A lot of immigrants, kids, we all come up with this idea that, gosh, we got to avoid the loss. So my whole early life was all about avoiding that loss and that pressure, constantly avoiding that loss. And then when you hit escape velocity, and I'm very grateful for having been successful in my life and according to the achievement phase.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the bottom's not going to fall out. And you're like, okay, what do I do now? Like, I'm not going to get kicked out anymore.
Yeah.
Like I can get a B, I can get a C, and it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It's not going to, my life's not going to fall apart. And then you lose meaning. You're kind of like, oh gosh. So you got to redefine success. You got to redefine achievement. So achievement, significance, and legacy. But to answer your question, the first phase of my life was all about achievement, and it was all about avoiding the loss.
God, I never thought of that in those terms, avoiding the loss.
Yeah.
I could look back in my life and probably put about almost half of it in that bucket.
Sure.
For sure. Like, I mean, if I'm being honest, I could probably put almost half of my life at certain points of just trying to avoid the loss. Just, like that was what I was.
Yeah, it's what you're trained to do.
Yes.
That's what life teaches you to do.
Yes.
So let me give you this framework.
Go for it.
Right? I've been training jiu-jitsu for 25 years or so. It is maybe the first pure thing that I've ever had in my life.
Yes.
Is one of my most formative endeavors and experiences because it was the first time I engaged in something that, number one, was just for me. No one told me to do it. It didn't add any prestige. No one knew what jiu-jitsu was, right?
That's
I mean,
true.
you're pajama wrestling on the ground with Brazilian guys, and sometimes you take it off and you've got a Speedo on, and you're not telling your girlfriend you're doing that.
Yeah,
Like, there's
no
no
way.
bragging about that. But it was just for me.
Yeah.
Didn't matter what you looked like, how big or tough you were.
Yeah.
The mat never lied. It was the most honest and earnest thing possible. And it didn't require attributes. So being the 16-year-old prepubescent kid at Princeton, or being the Rudy of, a sport and sucking at it, it didn't matter because jiu-jitsu taught you through technique how to defeat anything.
Yeah.
Right. And there's Hickson Gracie, one of the living legends of jiu-jitsu, talks about jiu-jitsu making you invincible.
Yeah.
And people think about that. People in jiu-jitsu, they're like, oh, jiu-jitsu makes you invincible. And the common thought is, oh, if I'm invincible, that means I can walk around and beat anybody.
Yeah.
Walk down the street, chest puffed,
Yeah.
head high, I'll crush everybody.
Yeah.
That is not invincibility.
Yeah.
Invincibility should be defined as this. In any conflict, in any endeavor, there are 3 outcomes. There's a win, there's a loss, and there's a draw. Those 3 outcomes. What jiu-jitsu teaches you is how to keep yourself safe. So no matter how big or strong the person is, no matter what the period of time is, you've got the technique to 100% take away the possibility of loss. Jiu-jitsu keeps you safe.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you're going to beat everybody, but it teaches you how to take loss off the table.
I like that.
And so that's why jiu-jitsu is so powerful. It's so wonderful for kids, for women, for smaller guys, whatever it is. Certainly big guys can use it and crush everybody.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. I mean, we all know Tim Kennedy. I mean, the guy looks like a shaved ape. And it's insane how amazing that guy is, right?
Ape.
But that guy doesn't need jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, no.
Please stop.
Yeah,
you won
I know, right?
already. Give it up, right?
Wish I could just draw some of it out of him.
Yeah,
and put it into
exactly.
me.
But you and me, we need jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
I needed
I do too.
jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
right? But the point of this is, when we talk about achievement, we talk about success, we talk about being in that phase of life.
Yeah.
And we talk about how, guys like you and me, guys and gals who kind of come from harder environments, sometimes it's going from -0, and that's good enough, right?
Yeah.
That is what jiu-jitsu provided for me. I think about the first phase of my life. My first phase of my life was all about just teaching me how to avoid a loss.
Yeah.
But if I have kids, you've got 2 boys. If I could teach them anything, if I could give them anything, I think what I would love to give them is the safety, the confidence, the comfort that jiu-jitsu gives me on the mat or on the street of, hey, the bottom's not going to fall out, man. You don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And imagine if you were in life or in the ring or on the mat, and you walked around, you knew you were invincible.
Yeah.
You knew that loss wasn't a possibility.
Yeah.
How much easier would it be to swing for the fences?
Yeah.
How much easier would it be to find joy, to seek joy, to do want versus
true,
should?
Man.
How amazing would that be? And so that's in my second phase of life. So achievement, significance, and my chase for significance, doing something bigger than me. I am trying to take the lessons that I learned from my parents, take the lessons that I learned from jiu-jitsu, and understand that I'm not going to lose. There's no loss,
I love that,
there's
man.
no catastrophic loss risk in my life anymore. I can go swing for the fences.
Yeah. And you're doing like that mentality. What that mentality does for you is it gives you freedom, the freedom to, like you said, put it all out there and not worry per se, because you know that you're going to either come out with a win or a draw.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to be okay.
I love that philosophy.
I'm going to be just fine.
That's an amazing way to think about things. And I had never put it in that perspective, but it's so true. Win, loss, draw. You take loss off the table, and that's a win no matter how you look at it.
Life is great. How amazing would life be if you just knew nothing's going to hurt me?
I love that, man. That's brilliant. I love that.
All stolen, by the way.
Yeah. But still, I will say this, because as an instructor, the material that I use to teach has originated from somebody else.
Yeah.
Like the creativity that I have brought to it, in my opinion, is nothing more than an evolution of what I was first taught. So yes, everything that I say, I always, one of my things that I try to get across to people is I am where I am because I stand on the shoulders of great men who shared that knowledge with me that I have taken and share with other people. But I also have learned some of the other attributes that help me to do that better.
Yeah.
So I can say that for sure. So, the three phases, the way that you define the three phases of life, achievement, significance, and legacy, are also very empowering because they help to put a title, if you will, on effort. What's happening in your life? Like in this case, in your achievement phase, all that effort was for achievement. And now the same effort is now goal driven for something else, for significance.
Completely different rubric. I'm so much of a different person today than I was 5 years ago.
God, that's amazing. That's so cool.
New for 2023 from CMMG, the compact action Descent is now in 9mm. Their Descent line took portability to a whole new level, and now they've done it again. Available in 6.5 and 10.5 barrel lengths, this compact platform offers the modularity of the AR-15 while being compatible with a wide range of magazines and ammo. The soft recoiling radial delayed blowback system makes this pleasant to shoot and comes with the reliability that CMMG is known for. For more info, check out cmmg.com.
What about biggest challenge in your life?
Oh, it's exactly that. My biggest challenge in my life was not a tough upbringing or reconciling the fact that my parents did everything right in one dimension, but maybe it's harder in the other, or trauma or this, that. It's not. My biggest challenge is taking a look at who I was during the achievement phase of my life.
Yeah.
And not hating myself for that.
Wow.
Looking back and, I was a right asshole. I was an absolute dick. I just was.
Yeah.
I was, and I probably still am in a lot of ways. I am so embarrassed.
Yeah.
There's so much, so there's, I think it's Brene Brown who says, hey, guilt is feeling bad about something you did.
Yeah.
And shame is feeling bad about who you are.
Right.
I got a lot of shame. I'm really ashamed of who I was for a very long time.
Interesting.
And the biggest challenge in my life is probably twofold. One, the frequency of those in the shower moments. Do you guys ever have this where you're in the shower and you're like, God damn it. Or like, oh,
and something flashes in your head.
And you're like, that embarrassing moment. You're just like, I just want to crawl into a hole and die.
I have many of those.
Yeah, I think everybody does. It's a very common thing. Yeah. But the challenge is the frequency with which that happens.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's just kind of like, oh gosh, I was an asshole there. I was listen, at the intersection of insecurity and ambition is where a man or woman loses their soul. At the intersection of insecurity and ambition is where you lose your soul. And I was deeply insecure and very ambitious.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I lost my soul I don't know if I ever had it, honestly. And so, the frequency with which I'm reminded of it.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about, that is just a constant punch in the face.
Oh, geez.
Every day, 7 times a day. And then having to pretend that it doesn't bother me and then trying to lead people or be a good human being and being like, oh my God, I feel like a piece of crap. That's one. And the second thing is, this other side of that coin, and the biggest challenge for me is metabolizing that, to looking back and recognizing I need to say thank you to that asshole, horrible version of me. Yeah. That version of me allowed me to survive the hardship of my childhood, my upbringing, all that pressure. Yeah. That was too much for a young kid to bear. Yeah. All that transgenerational trauma from immigrant parents and the stresses that they had. I'm 43. I don't have kids. My parents had me in their late 20s. Wow. The hell would I have done at that time if I were poor, living in inner city Chicago, and I had 2 dumbass kids running around? I remember one time getting I'm not going to say how bad it was, but, getting scolded, hint, hint, scolded, by my dad when my dad, poor guy was just working 2 jobs, going to school, dealing with racist, idiots and whatever. And then he goes home and he finally gets a nap. And my brother and I go jump off of the dresser or whatever the hell we did and woke him up, and ooh, there was hell to pay. And I'm going to sit here on a podcast and talk about, that really hurt me. That was really hard. It's like, well, shit, like obviously. But, I look back and I'm like, okay, yeah, that kid didn't know it. He was an asshole, but he didn't know it. And I got to be like, hey, I'm being flippant about that. But there were a lot of experiences in my adult life and my teenage life where I was super hard.
Yeah.
Where I tried to be cool or tough or pretend that nothing really bothered me.
Yeah.
And that was because I was at the intersection of insecurity and ambition, and I didn't know how to handle it except by pretending like I knew what I was doing.
Yeah. And
gosh, I hate that version of me, but I got to thank that version of me because it got me to where I am.
Yeah.
And so that's true. That is truly the hardest part of my life right now.
Yeah.
Is not just forgiving myself for that, but thanking myself for that. And then when those opportunities come up to see somebody from that portion of my life and be like, yeah, listen,
you got a second?
Yeah.
It's good.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that, man.
Yeah. It's so funny because I have, I can recall when I was younger, and I used to write it off as being immature. As I listen to you, though, I can't help but feel, looking back, like maybe there was some of the same kind of thought process in that sense that, I had to do what I had to do. I was a kid that went from a middle class upbringing with no problems whatsoever to being in a completely different culture within the Navy and then into combat and then, living the rest of my life in that manner. I have to think that there were probably some, and maybe they were defense mechanisms that I put up to
survival
manage.
techniques.
Exactly. And I could think back to some of the choice words that I might have had for some of the guys that, either in the team area or the platoon or even afterwards, and thinking back and saying, I was probably being a dick there, but at the same time, maybe that was part of that defense mechanism. That's
what you needed.
Yeah.
That's what you needed to get through it.
Yeah.
Right. And what's interesting is that gives me so much compassion. And I want to use that word intentionally. Compassion is empathy combined with the ability to hold someone with tenderness.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're going through, but I also can be tender towards it. I can really, be soft with it. It gives me so much more compassion for the people that I've met in my life where I'm like, you were an asshole to me, right?
Yeah.
And you were, you betrayed me. You did this, you did that. And then you kind of think about that. And I look back and I'm like, oh, you know what? They were doing their own thing too.
Yeah.
I caught them at a time in life where they were going through things and that was their survival mechanism. And maybe it wasn't personal.
Well, they're looking back at it for me, it never was personal. I can look back and see how I was just a jerk or an asshole or whatever the case might be. But now I can kind of find a little solace knowing what generated that in a sense. Now, this is a question that I don't often ask our guests, but because I feel like it's a great question for you because you're one of the folks that has been so clear in your vision, which is, how do you want to be remembered? What is your legacy?
So I'm not in that phase yet.
Right.
But it's actually an interesting question because I say this a lot. The number one goal in life for me is to, the day before I die, to be able to say, I became the man I was born to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that I want to avoid the most is on that day to say, gosh, I wish I had another year.
Yeah.
And I got that I've got a great executive coach, so I got to plug him here, a guy named Jim Hewling. Wonderful guy. And he, is a Southern guy, does a lot of CrossFit.
Nice.
I think this year he's going to PR at some like ridiculous 400 plus pound deadlift. He's a high achieving guy, but he taught me a lot. And that was one of the things is at the end of my days, I want to be able to say, I became the man I was born to be. So I'm not in the legacy phase yet.
Yeah.
I think about, how I want to be remembered.
Yeah.
Working backwards from that day.
Yes.
I have gone through doing a lot of work trying to figure out what I want, the most important relationships in my life, those people, what I want them to say about me on that day.
Yeah.
I want them, because I'm in the significance aspect of my life, I want to do things with, for, and through other people.
Yeah.
Something bigger than me.
Yeah.
I think all the time about, hey, what do I want my sisters, I have 3 cousins who I call my sisters, what do I want my sisters to say about me the day before I died? When I ask them, or someone asks them a question, what did Donald's relationship with you mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What was he to you in your life?
Yeah.
For me, all I want to do right now is I want to know that there's going to be a dozen, couple dozen, hundreds of people, whatever it is, who can genuinely, authentically say something positive on that day about what my relationship with them meant to them. For me personally, I want to be the idea of home. I want to be the idea of home for the people whom I love.
I like that.
I want to be the number one call for them when things go great. I want, when shit hits the fan, I want them to know, man, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know if I call Donald or I show up on the doorstep, number 1, he's not going to judge me.
Yeah.
Number 2, I'll be safe. And number 3, we'll figure it out.
I love that, man.
And what that means is I'm going to need the resources, whether it's capital, knowledge, or network. The only 3 things that really compound in your life is people, capital, and ideas.
I love that.
I need to build that up so that if something does happen to someone I love, I can help with that.
I love that too, man.
So that's all I want. Is I want to know the day before I died that I was the idea of home for the people I love.
Man, that's beautiful. First of all, really is. And it reminds me kind of like the way that you were approaching this reminds me of something. It's been a practice for many generations in the military where you sit down and you write out, your obituary. I first was exposed to this when I had to get my very first will before I went into combat. I didn't, like a will. I'm fucking 19 years old. What do I need a will for? Sure. Duh. So just to show you how
I leave my Corvette with 84 payments left on it.
Just to show you how naive and gullible I was at that point in my life. And so I had a good friend of mine. He was one of my platoon mates, what we reference as a sea daddy, who explained to me why the will was important, because it was important to ensure that my family was taken care of, to ensure that things were left aside and that no loose ends, that I didn't put a burden on my family, to make sure that everything was as clean as it possibly could be. And it sounds a little morbid to some people, I know, but to guys like us or guys that had that experience, it wasn't. It was very clarifying.
Yeah.
Very clarifying. And he went on to say, because I was such a doofus about the will thing, he basically said, I want you to sit down. I had to go to legal and do all the stuff with the will thing, and that took a lot of time, and we were getting ready for our deployment, and I was like, I don't got time to do this. He's like, you're gonna make time. And then when I got done with it, he's like, you're not done yet. And I had to sit in one of our classrooms. He brought me into the classroom. He's like, do not leave this classroom until you write out what you're
What'd you write?
Oh man, I can't remember all of it because it was 4 sentences. Because I'm like,
Jeff was a bad ass.
I was 19 years old, I was like, but it was such an interesting, and I've thought about that since then, and I've thought, it would be a good project for me to redo, because it falls into line with what you're talking about right now.
Let me suggest something that
Go
I do.
for it.
I do this once a year.
Oh, this is going to be good.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And because I say all the time, hey, in our lives, we're not trying to build a resume. We're trying to write an obituary, right?
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
I think it's a super important way to think about, achievement, significance, and legacy.
I love that.
We're trying to write an obituary, but it's hard to write an obituary, right? Because an obituary is oftentimes it's kind of full of crap, right? It's like,
totally,
it's not how you are remembered.
Yeah.
It's how you want to be remembered.
Exactly.
And that's number 1. Number 2, when you read obituaries, and I don't do this often, I'm not some morbid guy, but as you get older, I know a lot of people who do read obituaries, and what they do is he accomplished this, he had this kids, or she did that, or, you know, it's kind of, I did this. It doesn't say anything about who they were.
Yes.
And so the suggestion I would have for you, and I do this once a year, is take somebody who is really important to you in your life.
Yeah.
And write a letter in their voice.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Not bullet points.
Yeah.
But really write a letter in their voice that describes, this is what my relationship with Jeff meant.
I love that. Oh.
Right. And as if this were a day, 2 days before you died. Now, you're not gone yet, because then they only remember the good stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
But, a month, 6 months, whatever it is before you're gone. It's like, I think about, I wrote this from the perspective of one of my cousins/sisters, and it was like, he was the idea of home. What I was just talking about. He never missed a chance to tell me he loved me. He was always there. Never missed a call. I have an hour-long call or a 30-minute call with each of my 3 sisters every week, and I never miss it.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
He was always there. I just knew it.
Yeah.
And I shared the best news with him. I shared the worst news with him. I talk about all these things. I don't want to get too deep into it, but I think that exercise is a powerful one.
It sounds like it. And I'm actually kind of excited now. It's kind of rolling through my head, this as an annual exercise and the importance behind it. And it's like, I'm very excited. I'm not going to wait till the beginning of next year. I'm thinking
just take a stab at it, and don't stop until you get to emotional depth.
Ooh,
because that's what you need to get to.
Yeah.
Because what's going to end up happening, at least in my experience, is that you're going to write these things down, and some of it is going to be, this is how I knew Jeff. This is how we met. This is what I thought of him when we first met.
Yeah.
And this is what changed. And this is how our relationship grew. And it's going to be kind of past tense.
Yeah.
It's all past tense because you're supposed to be gone.
Yeah.
But then it's going to get to the point where it's aspirational, where your relationship with that person, what you meant to them, it's not what it is today. If they were to write it about you today, they wouldn't write this. But it's like, maybe it's for one of your sons. It's like, my dad, when I got older, he was at my wedding.
Yeah.
He gave me the life lessons.
Yeah.
It was really hard in the first 20 years of my life.
Yeah.
But man, the next 20 years of my life, he was always there. Whatever it is.
That's exactly it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so setting that and saying like, oh, now I know who I want to be
100%
to this person.
Dude.
And now I know I am not going to let circumstance, emotion, the challenges for me, language barrier, but I'm not going to let that get in the way of like my relationship with this person.
Yeah.
Because before I die, I became the man I was born to be. I built this relationship into what I wanted it to be. And I wrote that letter to do that. And I think it's been really powerful for me.
I love it, first of all. And I am thankful that you shared that with us, because that's definitely an exercise that I'm going to be doing here as well, not right away, but I'm going to start playing with that idea. And I think the reason why I like the idea, first of all, has to do with something that I've always been compelled to do, which is to set a target on the horizon and work towards it. And in this case, I may not be what I say exactly in this exercise, but now I have purpose at achieving what I say. And the next year, I have the ability to say I was that person.
Yeah.
Or I was what I wanted to be.
If you set the goals right.
Exactly. Yeah. I know. So that's why I'm saying.
Otherwise, you'll be disappointed if you set the goals to something you're incapable of being.
Yeah.
Like next year, I'm going to be Tim Kennedy. I'm going to smash everybody. That's not going to happen. That's not happening, man.
No worries there.
Yeah.
No worries there. So, and I wanted to circle back to this because there's a, the thought process reminds me of, how I try to also approach jujitsu, in that, like what does it mean to me? Well, it's very, for me, jujitsu is something for me. I don't do it for, like in the past, I would do activities because it was what other people were doing, or it's what I should do because it was within my career path, or any number of reasons I did them. But they didn't always bring me joy or a feeling of true accomplishment. And what I mean by that is because I am the soul, I am the captain of my ship in this journey of jiu-jitsu. I am solely responsible for both the failures and the successes, but I also get to share in the achievements.
Mm-hmm.
I get to be, happy about all that. And it's a pure joy for me in the sense you have had 25 years of this. When you started off, did you feel this was pure joy for you?
Let me think about that.
I know it's 25 years ago.
Yeah. I will say jiu-jitsu again is maybe the purest experience I've ever had in my life. And my relationship with jiu-jitsu has changed.
Well, I imagine.
A lot over the years. But when I started, it was pure joy.
Yeah.
Right? I remember when I started, I was allowed to train 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I was the nerdy kid who, no athletic talent, Rudy, 100 nothing, 5 foot nothing, whatever it is. And when I'm going in there, and there's some pictures out there of me, not the strapping young lad I am today. But I remember coming in with a notebook. I still have these notebooks. They're sitting.
Oh my
in
God.
my house. These notes from, white belt days when you're drawing stick figures and whatnot. But I remember my worst days were Friday because I trained Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So Monday I would train, Tuesday, review the notes and think about training. Wednesday I would go train. Thursday I would take note or read the notes and get ready for training. And Friday I would train. And then there were 2 days.
Yeah.
Until Monday. And I was like,
I know that feeling so well.
Very much it was joy.
And what's interesting too is the when I travel and I haven't sometimes my travel schedule does not allow me to find a drop in. The hours for the drop ins don't always coincide with my schedule. So I've experienced some droughts.
Yeah.
And what I've come to appreciate in those droughts is that, yes, I'm going to obviously get home. Yes, I'm going to get back to the gym. Yes, I'm going to get back to the whole aspect of what I enjoy. But that drought, what I have found is I get into an emotional state of almost that. Obviously, I can't wait to get back and can't wait to do that. Get back on the mats. But I've also kind of found myself finding ways to be calm about the droughts. I get anxious and there's this anxiety that I have to get back out there.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously very young in my career and I feel like, the time, if I'm not putting enough time in, I'm also losing.
Someone's going to outpace you.
Yes.
Let me ask this. Do you have a nemesis in the gym?
Everyone. That's
so I remember talking, you're bringing me back 20 plus years. Right?
I love this.
So when I started training, this is the uphill both ways story, right?
Yeah.
When I started training, there was, 3, maybe 5 places to train in the entire country.
God, that's crazy
right?
to think about.
Steve Maxwell's, the original Gracie Training Association in Philadelphia, right? And there were other ones, but probably in the sense that these are the ones that I knew of that were affiliated with the Gracie family.
Yeah.
Right? But there was Philly. I think Henzo and Craig Kukuk were in New York. There was the Gracie. There was basically Southern California, so LA, Gracie Torrens, and then the offshoots from there. And then there was a handful of other training associations, kind of here or there. But you knew everybody who trained. Like you knew anyone who was good. Certainly, if you were a purple belt, you were a god. And so we knew all of them. We could name them. It was like you had baseball cards with them.
Oh
I remember. This is like Matt Serra was a purple belt on the East Coast, and you're like, oh my god, that's Matt Serra. The fanboy over that, right? There were guys like John Burke on the West Coast. There's just there are legends now, like John Danaher, Henry Akins, these like, Yoda and Obi-Wan respectively of jiu-jitsu. These guys were like white belts. No one knew who they were.
Oh my God.
So back then, it was kind of a big deal, but you knew everybody who trained. And when you went to go train, everyone kind of knew everybody. And you felt like, because you couldn't train that much and we only knew like 5 techniques and we drilled them like crazy.
Yeah.
you had exactly that feeling that you're talking about. It's like, if I don't train today,
Yes.
then I'm falling behind
Yes.
everybody
Yes.
else. And when I come back and everyone knows who I am, I'm going to get beat. And my life is over.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, I'm going to be all of a sudden when that once a year seminar that comes and you want that coveted blue belt, because that's where everyone wants to get, because that's all you could get back then.
Oh my God.
It's like, oh God, I'm not going to get promoted. It's not going to work, whatever was motivating you or whatever.
Yeah.
I remember every nemesis I ever had and in every academy I was ever in. It was like, oh, that guy's close to me in weight. That guy's close to me in experience. It's like, I got to be better than that guy.
Yeah.
And so constantly, if I missed a training day, I was like, oh my God, Joe, there's this guy, Joe in New Jersey. I was like, Joe is he's gonna beat my ass. Next time I go there, he's gonna put it on me because he's gonna learn that this is gonna be the day that he learns the escape to that one thing
that I have going for me.
That's the only thing I got going. He's gonna learn it. And I know it. I know it for a fact. And you're sitting there rocking back and forth in the shower. Like, oh God, it's gonna happen. And that's for sure. And it's funny that it's still happening, right?
Yes.
Totally. 25 years later, you guys have access to so much jiu-jitsu, but you're still freaking out about
God,
that.
I love it. And you mentioned something, back then we practiced just our 5 techniques.
That's all you knew.
I love that though. The purity of it at that moment. Cause obviously I don't have any way of really appreciating that, but you do, like just those.
Man, we learned jiu-jitsu like the Taliban watches reality TV. Like that's how we learned jiu-jitsu. We were in a fucking cave in the middle of nowhere, and some dude got to go to Brazil and came back with left with an empty suitcase and came back with all these crappy like jiu-jitsu gis and had one bootleg tape that was like a dub of a dub of a dub of a dub. And it looked, it was like fraying at the edges, and you're looking in black and white, and we would just rewind it and watch it and rewind it and watch it and be like, what did that guy do?
I love this.
What was that move? Because I've never seen that move. We knew one way to pass the guard. And we were so stupid and arrogant. We thought that was the only way. So when someone else came in and showed us another way to pass the guard, we're like, that's not technically sound. You got to put your arm under the leg and you got to stack them. That's the only way. And we're just like, oh my God. Oh my God. No wonder like everyone brags about how, jiu-jitsu is legitimate because it takes 11 years to get a black belt.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we were stupid. Because we had no access to information. It was like, like I said, it's like the Taliban, like in Afghanistan, in a cave, they're like, oh yeah, it's like Paris Hilton, she's new. Like,
yeah. Woo.
Yeah, it's amazing. No, we got nothing.
Oh my God.
But it was what we did have. Oh, we held on to it tightly.
Yeah, I'll bet.
It's like you learned something new, and everyone shared information within your academy, but no one shared information outside of it.
Oh, I can imagine.
And it was one of the coolest things too, because back then, schools were you couldn't train anywhere else. Right, you had this term called a créance. You were a traitor if you went from Gracie school to Carlson Gracie or to this whatever.
Oh wow!
And so you would go to Brazil, and everyone would be like puffed up and looking at these other academies, and you go to the World Championships, and you go there for a month before and train in Brazil and whatever. Then you go out there, and you could see somebody. You could see somebody on the mat and not see the patch they had on their back. And based on the way they passed guard or were aggressive or not aggressive, you'd be like, I know what school that guy's from.
No shit.
And that's how segregated the learning was back then. And so I walk into the academy and I see blue belts doing crazy stuff. And I'm like, where'd you learn that? I was like, I'm on a BJJ Fanatics account. And I'm sharing it with 3 of my buddies and got 82 videos. And I learned all the shit you spent thousands of dollars and 20 years to learn. And I was like, well, must be nice. Must be nice.
Yes. Well, I would say that if you were to ask, I would say if you were to ask some of those people, hey, if you could take my path versus this path, which path would you probably want? I know that I would probably want your path, to be at it when it's in its infancy, to watch.
I want my path.
Yeah. I want to see because it's historical. Yeah. It's amazing to see the growth that, and I'm coming into it and I'm trying to, learn a little bit more and expend a time, not just in understanding a guard pass, but understanding, more of what's underneath the surface of sorts, trying to appreciate that. I know that I would have appreciated that. I can remember, in the Navy, we're very fortunate to be exposed to a lot of different forms of combatives. And I fancied myself and I gravitated towards more of the edged weapon and impact weapon, the sticks and whatnot. And I did a lot of stick fighting, a lot of edged weapon stuff. And my roommate, I remember the team that he was at had the very first exposure to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And he came home, and we would do this. We would share stuff. Like we were each other's test dummies. You know, there was 4 roommates in the house at that time, and everybody would exchange information. Like, hey, I just went to this school. We learned this kind of thing. So he comes home, and I remember we're in the living room, and he's like, I want to show you this. I need to show you this. I just learned this today. And I'm like, okay, what do you know? And he's like, come here. He gets on the ground. He's like, get in between my legs. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And he's like, no, I just learned this. I got to show this to you. I got to practice this. And I'm like, all right. And so I remember that it was a sweep. It was the earliest sweep ever. You know, the leg went on. You know, your leg went on the outside of their leg. Then you wrapped their arm, and then you bridged and rolled. And
the elevator sweep.
Yes,
sweep.
For sure. So
one of our 2 sweeps, by the way. That's all we knew. We had 1 pass and 2 sweeps.
Oh my god, that's hilarious! Because that was like what time period was that? That was like early 90s, like maybe 92 to 94, somewhere's in that period.
Yeah. I mean, pre-UFC then.
Oh yeah. It was pretty cool. Like these guys were, you know, cutting edge in a sense, like, because, you know, we would bring in so many different amazing, gifted in their own respects. And at that point in our history, we would take a little bit from everybody and we would kind of assimilate it into our own style, which was a hodgepodge of Frankenstein, if you will. We eventually formalized everything into a system, which I think is better for us in the sense of, you know, what our end state is, what we're trying to achieve. But I was lucky in that period because I got a chance to get exposure to all of these other forms of combatives. And I'll never forget that, man. He for, I don't know, maybe an hour, that's all we did. He just practiced that elevator sweep.
We got really good.
Oh, yeah.
At very few things. We got, you know, an inch wide and a mile deep. But I mean, the other thing was that we tested it every day. You know, I didn't have 50 other dudes in pajamas to go train with. Like, you would learn, it would be 10 people or whatever it is. Or you're lucky. And then you'd go out and you couldn't wait to go to the bar to get in a fight, to go try something out and be like, oh yeah, this really works. Oh, it didn't work. And you come back to your teacher and you wait. We would always do gi, no gi, and then what's now called MMA. We used to call it Vale Tudo, but it would basically be like you would train with the gi, then you would take off the gi, and then you would like either put gloves on or just beat the crap out of each other.
Oh, wow.
You know, and that's how we learn it. And you would come back, you'd be like, hey, this, like, come back with a black eye and be like,
didn't work.
Well, what did I do wrong? And most of the teachers like, I don't know, man. Like, I learned the same shit you did. You know, I saw the same grainy Taliban video that you did. What do you want me to say? You know, let's just test it out. And we just beat the crap out of each other. Well, and that's why it took me 11 years to get my black belt. Because we didn't know what the hell we were doing.
Oh my God. Well, you know, what's so funny is when you think about that, but the beautiful thing about that was the hindsight or the insight to know to pressure test.
Oh yeah.
That I think, you know, because when you think about what the UFC did to the world of combatives and the you know, the ultimate fight, if you will, and then what allowed in the early stages, what allowed jiu-jitsu to flourish so much was that it had already been being pressure tested at that level, at a you know, UFC kind of level. It was already being pressure tested before that. That's what
it was. It was reality.
Yes,
is what it was.
Yes,
right? Because you and I are of the generation. I remember being a kid, right? Being the poor kid. You go to the grocery store. This is my favorite thing to do. Go to the grocery store. You go to the magazine section.
Yeah.
And you go to whatever you're interested in, right? And for me, it wasn't girls, it wasn't guns, it wasn't cars. I went to Black Belt magazine.
Yep.
And then you go to the back of Black Belt magazine. I wouldn't read any of the articles. I go to the back and they would have like 1 or 2 techniques.
Oh, wow.
It was kind of like if you were a guitar player, they'd have, you know, 2 or 3 songs in the back that you could learn, like tablature and whatnot, right? But you had that. And I go, watch that. And be like, oh, so the next time somebody tries to kick me in the head, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap the guy's leg.
Yeah.
It's never going to work or whatever it is. Like, but then jiu-jitsu comes along and they teach you something and it actually works because you're trying it in the gym. Yeah. You're trying it at the academy, trying on men. Or like idiots like us, you're going out in bars and trying this stuff. So it really works. And you're like, oh, that's amazing. But I think it cuts 2 ways. early jiu-jitsu was amazing because it was the first time martial art became martial skill.
Ooh.
Like martial art became martial science.
I like that.
It wasn't just, I'm a middle-aged guy who got bullied in high school and I learned how to kick a couple times and now I started my, taekwondo school and whatever. Yep. But, I could have broken your nose. I would have, but you never really trained it. So you had no idea. So it was very real in the training methodologies and you could see the reality of it in the UFC. So in some ways it was incredible.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
and that
absolutely.
far outweighed all the drawbacks. But one big drawback, and I think this is where, in maybe the second generation or third generation of jiu-jitsu practitioners in the United States suffered from, is that we created hero worship.
Ooh.
We created this idea that you could only learn real jiu-jitsu from a certain group of people, whether it was the Gracies or your instructor or whatever it was. And then you conflate these things. And this happens in all organizations. You conflate, this person's really good at jiu-jitsu, so they must be really good at life.
Oh.
So let me listen to this person. And you get this kind of cultish quality. And then it's just the natural evolution of how, science and skill turns into art, turns into dogma and belief. And then sooner or later, generations away, right, someone gets their ass beat. And they're like, oh, what happened to jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you guys ever heard of that study with the 5 monkeys and the ladder. So there's, I'll do this really quick.
Yeah.
It's about group behavior, group think, right? Dilution of ideas.
Yes.
So put 5 monkeys in, an enclosure.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And you have this tall ladder in the middle. And at the top of the ladder, you've got bounty, bananas, whatever monkeys eat. I don't know, right? Something awesome.
Yeah.
Something amazing. And, they're playing around there. And then all of a sudden one monkey decides, oh, what's up there? And sees it and smells it. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go. So they get halfway up the ladder and some poor, probably 1970s, like grad student is armed with a fire hose and just pure animal abuse decides to, just spray this monkey in the face and just knock him off his ass and just be like, okay, I'm training this monkey. You can't go up the ladder.
Okay.
Right. So the first one goes and the second one goes, the third one goes, and all 5 of them realize, oh, I can't, I want this thing. And they try, but every time they get their ass beat.
Yep.
And they learn over time, don't even try.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Forget it. Like, it's awesome up there, but we'll never get there.
Yeah.
You take one monkey out and replace him with a fresh monkey.
Yeah.
New monkey shows up and it's like, Monkey Donald's coming in. And it's like, what's up, Jeff? Hey, nice to meet you. Hey, dude, what's up there? He's like, oh, no, man,
dude,
we don't go
want
up there.
That.
Don't go up there.
Yeah.
He's like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna go up there. So you go up and you start going and boom, sure enough, you get blasted in the face, right? You do this, you switch out all these monkeys and sooner or later, what ends up happening is, I missed one thing. What they do is every time they blast that one monkey in the face, they blast all the other 4. So everyone gets their ass beat. Yeah. So what ends up happening is after a while, the new monkey comes in and they're like, I'm going to go up this thing.
Oh, no,
and
you're not.
Monkey Jeff and Donald like, no, you aren't.
No, you won't.
Like, I'm not getting my ass beat for your dumb ass. And so you go in there and you beat the crap out of this monkey. You teach him, don't go up there. So you start self-regulating.
Oh, yeah.
And then sooner or later, all 5 original monkeys are gone.
Yeah.
Right? And then you take the bounty away.
Huh.
You don't put the bananas up there anymore.
Yeah.
You just leave a ladder. And then you replace one new monkey, comes in, puts his hand right on the ladder, is about to go up, and all 4 other monkeys jump him and beat the crap out of him.
Wow.
And if you were to ask that monkey, all the other 4 monkeys, why do you beat his ass? Like, why?
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to touch the ladder. That's just what we do.
That's what we do.
Right? It's groupthink, right?
Yeah.
So over time, what ends up happening is when you go from martial skill to art you start believing whatever the instructor says. This guy, or believing, this guy should teach me about life or whatever it is. And it gets diluted. You're, the best student is 80% of their instructor and 80%. All of a sudden you get somebody who is, 16% of the original instructor and they're teaching something. And then you get some schools that stop teaching realistic things or stop training hard or whatever it is. And then you get basically a whole bunch of monkeys that are doing really weird stuff. Yep. And you're like, that doesn't look like it's going to work on the street.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, yes, it will, because my teacher told me so.
So told me so.
Yeah. And so you get, a bunch of people who are jumping around doing crazy jiu-jitsu, and you've gotten far away from the source. Yeah. And what ends up happening is you put that person on the street or in the UFC and they get stomped.
Yeah.
right? And martial skill became art or became specialized skill.
Yeah.
And that is the number one thing that most old school jiu-jitsu guys and gals are like, it's got to work on the street. And, we're also like very arrogant about our era. Let's be honest. Like we're our own monkeys doing our stupid things or whatever it is. Because truth be told, if we train jiu-jitsu with these young cats learning all this new stuff, we would get our asses beat. We get tapped so fast. I mean, I get tapped all the time nowadays. Like it's just, I mean, it's a humbling experience.
Yeah.
I was awesome at jiu-jitsu at one point.
Yeah.
My jiu-jitsu is the same.
Yeah.
I'm still as good at that, but now my jiu-jitsu sucks.
Oh,
right?
wow.
Because I'm just getting beat all the time.
Because of
It's just the specialization
of
it. Right.
That makes sense.
And we just, my jiu-jitsu is different than someone else's, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because my jiu-jitsu is focused on something different.
Yeah.
I just got to make sure that I don't go into that, world of like, I'm not actually testing it anymore. I'm not training it.
Right.
To your point, I'm not like testing the techniques.
Yeah.
Because then all of a sudden I'm going to be the guy that has, again, gone from martial skill to just art.
I like that. And I like how you kind of also tied art and science together in that sense, because a lot of like when I teach, there is a science to teaching,
Sure.
but there's also an art to teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't thought of jiu-jitsu because it's always referenced as martial arts, and I never thought about considering it from martial science and like the other side of the coin. I've never really thought of it that way. And that's a great way to think about it.
Maybe let's talk about this difference between science and art.
Okay, please.
Right? So I love the idea that jiu-jitsu should be a martial science. It should be a martial skill.
Okay.
Right. It should be something that works on the street every time.
Okay.
Again, win, loss, and draw. It should take loss off the table.
Love that, man. That's such a great philosophy, man. I do love that.
And I believe that jiu-jitsu at its core needs to remain a martial skill. But as I get older, I realize now, because I got into jiu-jitsu because I wanted to learn how to fight. I got into jiu-jitsu because I was sick of all the martial arts out there that I knew were kind of BS.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to learn skill.
Okay.
And so I hated any place where you had to bow into the mat.
Oh.
Where you had to have this false sense of, respect. Respect should be earned, not given. I was just, it's like, listen, if you can beat my ass, then I will learn from you. If you can't, don't talk to me.
Yeah.
Right. Nowadays, I look at my life and I look at my journey in jiu-jitsu and I'm like, oh, I actually, for the first time ever, want to be a martial artist.
Interesting.
So weird for me.
I love hearing this.
And I want to retain the skill. And I still approach jiu-jitsu very scientifically, right? I want repeatable actions. I want scalable actions. I want to understand the principles of, there's a way, like you said, there's a way to learn, there's a way to articulate it, there's a way to apply it. That needs to be systematic.
Yeah.
There are algorithmic and there are organic grapplers. There are algorithmic and there are organic strikers.
Interesting.
Right? I don't want to be an organic striker, right? I don't want to be an artist that feels things. I want to be very systematic about it because I want it to work every time.
I like that.
Right. But now that I get older, I want to combine that with the philosophy. I want to combine that with a beginner's mind. I want to combine that with this idea that, it's not about being the baddest guy on the mat, that, I can be calm and use jiu-jitsu to teach me something that transcends that skill.
Yeah.
That I can use jiu-jitsu in my real life to have emotional mastery.
I love that.
And so it's such a weird thing for me to now recognize, oh gosh, I actually want to be a martial artist.
Oh.
So
you kind of come in full circle.
Yeah, a little bit. It took me a quarter of a century. But
I mean, that's probably fast for some
Maybe.
things, making a diamond, it takes, you got that going for you.
Yeah.
You beat out on that.
It's all about expectations.
Okay. So what would you say, or what do you think was a big mistake that you made in your life?
Oh God, there's so many mistakes.
Pick one.
Pick one. A big mistake in my life.
Yeah.
So many to choose from. All right, so let's get down to first order principles.
Okay.
Right? Because much like jiu-jitsu, let's not talk about a move. Let's talk about the principle.
Oh man.
Biggest mistake in my life was being inauthentic.
Okay.
Consistently inauthentic. What I mean by that, so I've got 5 core values. Number 1 is peace. Number 2 is authenticity. Number 3 is accountability.
I love that one.
Number 4 is wellness or self-improvement. Number 5 is influence, right? I want to be influential in people's lives. I want to, I grew up with nothing, so I want to have access to everything. I want to be the guy behind the guy, right? But authenticity, right? Being true to oneself, saying what you mean,
Yeah.
right? Being radically candid. I was so inauthentic for so long. I was at the intersection of insecurity and ambition.
Yeah.
And that was the cause and the source of all my greatest mistakes.
Interesting.
It was I chased after something that I thought I should want that I didn't want.
Huh.
I didn't say the damn thing when it was I didn't have the micro confrontation to clear the air, and that turned into something big.
Bigger. Yeah.
I didn't allow myself to address what I was really feeling and really understood. Let me tell you a story. So I grew up in Chicago. Again, 2 tiger parents. I went to boarding school when I was about 13.
Oh, wow.
And not like some fancy boarding school. It was some state-run boarding school for gifted, kids, just like, a nerd commune. It was really cool.
Nerd commune.
It was awesome. Because A, I wanted to get out of the house, and B, maybe feel very special in many ways. And I learned a ton. And I was a straight A student. I skipped my freshman year in high school because this is a school where you only had 3 years, sophomore year, junior year, senior year, and everyone lived 600 kids, 200 per class. And you went there, and it was super cool school, very cool, because it was called the Illinois Math and Science Academy. So, yeah, really cool.
Huh.
So, I was good at math and science and whatever, and it was kind of like a college curriculum when you were in high school, but kids from all over the state of Illinois got to go there. You had to apply, you get in.
Interesting.
So I did this for 3 years, and I excelled.
Nice.
I don't think I got a grade below an A.
Wow.
Just worked my ass off. I was very motivated and studied really hard. And I got into a great school. And then in that school, got to a great job and, was very successful. But in the comparison game, I didn't have nemesis in school. I had them in jiu-jitsu. But when I was young, you compare yourself like, how am I doing versus the litmus test or whatever. And on the topic of being inauthentic, and the topic of doing should versus want or passion, I thought there was a certain path to being successful. You work your ass off, you get straight A's, you go to a great school, you get straight A's or whatever, you get a great job and you do whatever. And so the path for me was into finance, and I worked at an investment bank, and I went to Princeton and I got the job that everyone wanted. And, went to high school, got to the school that everyone wanted to get into. And I looked at all my peers from back then, and I was just like, you know what, I'm doing great.
Yeah.
Life is good. And I was working 100 hours a week.
Holy shit.
Which is common in this field, right? That's just how I became an investor. It's kind of like, that's what you have to do. So working 80 to 100 hours a week, making 6 figures, thinking I was, like the man.
Yeah.
And hating my life and hating everything I was doing that early. Just being like, but you got to go through this hardship to get to the next level. And I think about all of my peers and friends in high school. And we had a school, because it was a state-run boarding school. If you got into this gifted school, you got automatic acceptance into the state school in Illinois, the University of Illinois, which is a great, great school.
Yeah.
So a lot of these kids were like, hey,
why not?
I'm good. Like, I don't have to work hard in high school. I'm good. I wanted to go to that school anyway. So these kids messed around and kind of did whatever. And I always thought arrogantly, I was like, oh, I'm so much better than these guys. I'm working my ass off. I'm not settling or whatever it is. And years after, I started this job, and I'm working another 100-hour-a-week job, and I'm making more money or whatever it is. The 5 people that I lived in a hall with, that they all, one started YouTube.
Oh, wow.
One started OkCupid, became the CEO of Match.com. Another one started Yelp. It's just
holy shit.
Those guys did all this stuff. And I was like, I should have partied more. I should have just, what the hell was I doing? What kind of idiotic path am I taking? And here's the biggest mistake that I made. Even when I noticed that, I still didn't change.
No way.
I still did the same crap, right?
Wow.
Now, listen, I love my job and it's great, and I find significance through it, right?
For sure.
If I were to have kids, or be like, listen, there's so many ways to make money. There's so many ways to define success. There's so many ways to achieve. Just do the thing that, maybe not just the thing that you love, because you don't know what you truly love when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Right. So don't just go to the fun thing, but do the thing that feels right, that you really feel like, man, I could just work my ass off at this forever.
Yeah.
right? Do that.
Yeah.
And you'll find a way to do well. Because every single person I've ever known who was high functioning, who could self-assess, self-correct, self-motivate in their lives, every single person who combined those abilities and pointed it in a direction where they were truly passionate, yeah, I mean, they've outpaced everyone on almost every measure. It's kind of incredible.
I love that. First of all, to be in that space with those entrepreneurs,
Let's be clear. I wasn't in that space. I was on the outside looking, and we were all friends and whatnot. But I lost touch, and I look at them like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's awesome.
But still, you were in a close enough space with that group of sorts. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
I have always been within one concentric circle or within the orbit of some extraordinary individuals.
Well, and I feel like that's because you probably attract that too.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the case.
But when I was younger, I felt like I chased things that I thought would bring me happiness and couldn't comprehend why I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to figure out, well, that's not actually what's really making me happy.
Sure.
And I feel like in this day and age that I've become way more comfortable with being adamant, I have to do things that make me happy. Before it was always, well, I have to do things that put a roof over the heads, put food on the table, blah, 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 blah. And, I'm at this point in my life where, and I like the philosophy, win, draw, take loss off the table. Now I'm at a point in my life where I just really have been convinced that if I'm pursuing something that makes me happy, everything else is going to be okay.
So let me ask you the question.
Go for it.
How do you make choices with that rubric where you're looking ahead and you're like, hey, I've got 24 hours in a day.
Yeah.
I've got 7 days in a week.
Yeah.
Presumably not everything that you choose to do makes you happy.
Not everything. No, that's true.
How do you decide? How do you decide what's first or second or third or fourth?
That's a great question. I have a hierarchy that I kind of fall into, much like your core values of sorts. My first level and the most important level is family. Mm-hmm. Then, and they all begin with an F, as that keeps it simple for me. Family, fitness, faith, and finances. So I've gotten to the point now where I will, when I'm at a decision-making point, where does this decision fall in comparison to those hierarchies? And will that decision negatively impact, like if it falls into finance, is that going to negatively impact the others? If I were to take a job that requires me to move away from the kids, that obviously is going to negatively impact. Do I need to do that job? Do I want to do that job? Will that job bring me happiness? Probably not.
Yeah. And
that's kind of how I've come. That's my decision-making matrix these days, is to kind of filter that through those 4 Fs.
So is fitness,
family, fitness, faith, and then finances. And
where's fun? You're missing one.
I am. What's funny is after our conversation here, that's definitely one that I have not. And you were talking about play and enjoyment and all that stuff. And, I'm sitting here thinking about that. And I'm like, you know what? Yes. When we talk about like play, getting out there and just having fun for the sake of having fun.
Yeah, it's not just competition. It's not getting fitter. When was the last time you jumped on a trampoline?
Oh, right? Well.
Or rode a scooter.
Yeah.
Whatever makes people happy. Right. I don't know, because I don't know how to play. I'm trying to figure this out.
So that's a good question. Like for me, play is very close to the way you described it. And I would add one more thing to play is something that, well, I guess you did say this brings you joy. It brings me happiness.
Joyous, pointless,
yes,
and all encompassing.
Yeah. So I have not added play or fun to that hierarchy. I haven't thought about it honestly until we started this podcast, but until you actually asked me, where's fun? I'm like, I don't have fun on my list. And I can look back at it and say, well, I don't think that list is complete.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't. And truthfully, I do like doing stuff that is absolutely pointless and just there's no meaning to it, no rhyme or reason to it, but it brings me joy. It brings me happiness.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
maybe you're getting enough of it, right?
Maybe.
For me, I know I'm not. I need to find more joy. So actually, as absurd as this sounds, I need to schedule fun in my life. I don't think that's because that makes it a priority. Exactly.
I don't think that's bad at all. I think that's actually something that is probably good in the sense that it's going to ensure that you track down something fun to do, whatever that fun might be.
So so I have a very similar rubric to you.
Right? I love
this is how I look ahead on my week.
I love this.
So every Sunday I look ahead and I've got 5 core values, right? Peace, authenticity, accountability, wellness or self-improvement and influence, right? But I've got 5 priorities. They're different. That's the how I do.
Okay.
Things. What I focus on is family first. It's the family I choose.
Yep.
Right. Never miss a call with my sisters.
Love that.
Never schedule it. I actually added my brother to it, which is awesome.
I love that too.
So that's 1. Number 2, it's bilateral friendships. Right. I think about the people that I'd go bury a body for or be there for. Because I have tons of acquaintances, but very few friends. It's 100%. Like that old, you ever see that movie Tombstone?
Yeah.
Right. And Val Kilmer is Doc Holliday.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, Doc, you're sick. Like, why are you shooting people and getting in gunfights for Wyatt Earp? He's like, well, he's my friend.
Yep.
He's like, oh, hell, well, I got a lot of friends. He's like, well, I don't.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember that scene.
And so I think about that, and I've got, a handful of really close friends, and I really want to invest in those.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the number two for me. Right. And this isn't the importance of my life. It's just how I structure my week. Right.
I love that.
Right. Number 3 is self-improvement, which encompasses health and things like that. It's like, I got to be learning something. I got to be working on my body. I got to be doing all this. So I make sure my workouts are there. I'm learning something, whatever it is. The 4th is work. Right. My, the things I'm trying to build in my companies or whatever. My 5th is my significant other, but I need to put play in there.
Yeah.
So what I do is, every Sunday I look ahead and I'm like, I look at my whole calendar.
Yeah.
No matter what meetings I have, I make sure that first layer by family is taken care of. Like I got my calls to my sister. Boom. Second thing is, what am I going to do this week where I can credibly say at the end of the week, I invested in my bilateral friendships.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll just be like, hey, remember to reach out to this guy or gal, right? I'm going to send this person a gift. I'm going to call this person and have a 30-minute conversation with them. Just be like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
Really, Jeff?
Yeah.
Right? And then I make sure my workouts and my therapy and all this different stuff are scheduled, right? And then I think about, work and then my significant other. But what I need to do is I need to add a trampoline session and play, because it's not sufficient for me to go into the jiu-jitsu academy and beat someone's ass or get beaten.
Yeah.
Right. That's like, it's not the same thing anymore.
I could see that. To me, it is kind of, I'm at that point in my journey where everything is so new that it's fun.
Yeah.
It's enjoyable. But I will say this, like when I reference family, I've always included my friendships, the close friendships, to be family as well. And I probably should extend that to be, friends that are outside of that close, tight family-ish friend network to help improve the connection and the community of sorts. I hadn't thought about that until you mentioned it, but I can guarantee you absolutely that I'm going to be more conscious of adding fun to that hierarchy. Like that's going to get added. And the other thing too that I do, family is always going to be top. And I can say that now because there was a time in my life when it wasn't.
Sure.
When I would do things that in my head I thought were the priority. I need to go on this trip after we just moved to this new state, new home, new house. Boxes are still, in the living room, but I need to go on this trip so that I can keep paying for this mortgage.
Yeah.
Instead of staying and helping to unpack and stuff like that. I can now my decision-making process would be significantly altered, where I would probably say no to the trip, or let's reschedule, or let's try to do this a different time so that I could take care of family first.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there's a great book called Atomic Habits.
Oh, I love that book. Yeah.
Book, right? And one of the things that I always talk about from that book is basically you've got to have something stick. It's not enough to say it's a priority. It's got to be a part of your identity. Oh. So let's say you want to be healthy. You want to eat healthy.
Yep.
It's not enough to to open the pantry and see cookies and see something healthy and say, you know what, I'm going to make the choice.
Yeah.
It's my priority. So I'm going to go make that choice.
Yeah.
The amount of ATP, the amount of psychic energy it takes to make a decision is quite a lot, actually.
Yeah.
You only have a certain amount for every day.
Yeah.
Right. So if you make all your decisions, like, and you're
In the
wasting
morning?
in the morning
spent.
on something, it's going to be hard to make real decisions later.
I like
so you got to
that.
make it a part of your identity. So it's
Okay.
not, hey, am I going to choose the donut or am I going to choose the apple or whatever you think? It's not a choice. I'm an athlete. I'm a family man.
Yeah.
I am a good brother to my sisters.
Yeah.
This is how I define it. So it's not a choice.
I like that.
It's not a choice anymore. I'm
I
not
do
making
like
a choice
that.
every Sunday, right? I'm just scheduling it,
I love that.
right? And I think that's super, like for me, I try to fit 3 gallons of work in a 2-gallon jug
Oh
all
my
the time. All the time.
Oh,
Because I
yeah.
don't feel like, again, I feel like the bottom's going to fall out. So if I'm not doing things constantly, I feel like life is going to catch up to me and it's all going
Yeah.
to go. I feel like my nemesis
Oh, it's
is
going to
gonna
pass
catch-
me.
Yeah, it's going to pass me, right? I think
So
about that all
true.
the time. So now I need to be deliberate, not just about the choices I make, but more importantly about who I am.
Yeah. I like
I'm
that.
an athlete. This is what I do. I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. I train.
That's
Like,
what I
it's
do.
not a choice.
I love that. That makes it so clear. It really does. And this also ties in really well with the next question that I want to ask you, which is, what's the best advice that you were given by a mentor?
The best, if I wish you had prepped me for these questions.
That's why I like them, because they're spontaneous and they're more off. I'm not saying that a preloaded question wouldn't be authentic.
Yeah. The best advice, I've gotten so much advice. And again, everything that I've talked about today has been stolen from some
Of course.
coach or mentor or peer or whatever it is. The best advice I've ever gotten from, okay. You know what? So I have a hospitality company in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Called the Eachwood Group. And we have a bunch of restaurants and nightlife places, and an extraordinary group of extraordinary people. And I love them to death. And I'm very passionate about working with them, even though it's not my day job, right?
Yeah.
I run a investment firm. We buy technology companies, and that's, what I do on a day-to-day basis. But I've got these partners, and one of them is this wonderful guy named Tony, and he's a hilarious guy. He's, I couldn't even describe him if I wanted to, but imagine one of those like Italian American guys that, right out of a sitcom, and he's hilarious. And he always, we have a call every month, and he asks me, hey, how are you doing with, your relationship or this or that? And, he's got 2 kids. And so, sometimes I go talk to Uncle Tony, and I'm like, hey, like, how do you feel about this? Like, he's like, are you going to have kids yet or whatever it is? And the advice he gave me was this. He goes, listen, man, you got to understand one thing when it comes to significant others, when it comes to your lady. He goes, whoever you date is going to be who you marry. And I'm like, what do you mean by that?
Huh.
It's like, whoever you date is going to be who you marry. He's like, listen, man, if your girlfriend squeezes toothpaste from the side of the tube and leaves that open, we talked about this earlier. Like, I'm an OCD guy, right?
Yeah.
I need things to be straight and perfect and
For
whatever it
sure.
is. And the more stressed I get, my survival technique is to straighten things out.
Hell yeah.
Right. So if he's like, if your girlfriend squeezes the Colgate from the side of the tube and leaves it there, you may like be like, hey, babe, like, this is really important to me. It's going to freak me out. Can you just do this? Can you help? You go to couples therapy or whatever it is. And you can get her to change her behavior.
Yeah.
For a period of time. It might be a month. It might be 3 months. It might be 10 years
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
But sooner or later, she's going to come back to squeezing that toothpaste on the side of the tube.
Yeah.
So you got to decide early on,
Yep.
is this something I'm cool with
Yep.
or not?
Yeah.
And I think about that all the time. And not even just in the context of relationships, but my employees and my teammates, and there's some shit that you are never going to get over.
Yeah.
And in the whole stoic vibe of like, allow me, like, I'm only going to get upset or I'm not really going to get upset about anything, but only about the things that I can control. If I can't control it, I'm going to let it go. Like, I'm going to decide, is this a deal breaker or not?
Yeah.
If I know she's always going to squeeze the toothpaste on the side of the tube, I better get over it.
Yeah.
Right? Or I better be like, hey,
That's
a deal breaker.
There's a door.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how it is. Like, and so I would say I think about that a lot.
Oh, I love that. It's funny too, because I literally have this exact conversation with my significant other, Jamie. because, I have wicked OCD. Like I was out on the counter while I was waiting. I was like adjusting things on the counter. And Lee's like, you need to fix this. It's not square.
And that's the thing she's got to figure out for you.
Yeah.
Like Jeff is going to be like this for the rest of his damn life.
Yeah. And you know what? So I came to the decision, and I would say this decision was not necessarily prompted through as well thought out process as you just described it. It just was, to me, it was like, okay, can I live with the fact that the toothpaste is always going to be jammed up? And, is she more important to me than that? And I basically, that's how I came. I was like, all right, fuck it.
Yeah, that's just how it's going to be.
But now it's funny because it's like a running joke in our house.
Yeah.
So I'll come home and, that'll be like, and she's over there giggling.
Yeah.
And it makes
that's what you have to do.
Exactly.
Right. I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah,
right.
well,
I'm saying like, this is great advice. I'm not saying I'm taking it yet.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, it was advice maybe that I didn't take per se, but it just became like this person was that important to me.
Yeah.
And I was able to value and recognize that. And I was able to say that is not that important. Like I'll fix it. If I have to every day in my life, the rest of the days that I'm with her, squeeze the toothpaste all the way up.
Yeah.
That's what I do. That's what I do.
Yeah.
And it becomes a running joke. It's like, we do stuff like that to each other, which helps us to manage and cope with one another in a good, positive, healthy way.
And I think it also just helps you understand yourself. It's like, what do I really care about?
Am I this bad that this is good?
Because half the time it's kind of like, really, it's not that big a deal.
No.
Like, is that going to be in the letter?
Yeah.
Right. At the end of my life? And so you're like, what do I remember? Like, what did my relationship with Jeff?
So OCD.
Yeah. His toothpaste tube was perfect every day. That's what I remember.
That's what I remember. Yeah. Let's hope that doesn't make it into the list.
That's a pretty unextraordinary life. It's pretty
yes.
Cool. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's great. That's great advice that I can actually really appreciate and actually value in the sense of its importance in my daily life, like what I feel like is important, like being able to value that and recognize, yep, that is less than this, the relationship. All right. So one final question, if you will. And this is a great question because I like the aspect of like hearing your thoughts on this. But what do you want our listeners? What do you want to be the big takeaway for our listeners from our dialogue, our discussion today?
Let me think about this because, part of what's implied in that question is that I've actually got something to say or people want to hear what I have to say. So let me define that. Right. How would I like to be seen? Through what lens would I like people to listen to what I've got to say? If I'm anything, I am an example of how you can never be a failure if you're not done yet.
I love that.
Right? If it's not over, you always have a chance. So on that nature versus nurture thing, right? I may have grown up, people may grow up with certain circumstances. They may have gone through a relationship, a marriage, a job, or whatever it is. And there can be things that they feel guilty about. I could have done that better. I didn't do that thing that was aligned with my values. I wasn't the person I wanted to be. It's not how I want to be remembered. Or it's just like, hey, I wasn't capable back then. I was a kid. I wasn't experienced, whatever. I was immature, whatever it is, If I'm anything, I'm an example of, hey, doesn't matter where you started. And it doesn't even matter where you are on the journey towards being the person that you were born to be, becoming the person that you were born to be. If you're not dead yet, if you haven't given up, as long as you don't give up, there's always a chance to get it better, to get it right, to look back and metabolize that experience, the joys, the traumas, the good, the bad, and just be like, you know what? That's who I was back then.
Yeah.
It's not who I'm going to be.
Yeah.
And if I look back and I define myself based on, the impact that I had, the influence I had on people's lives and how they're going to remember me when I get to that phase of legacy.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it was in the beginning, right? You keep it going, you're gonna have an opportunity to put more in that jar.
God, I love that. And I feel like it's beautiful in its simplicity. Just in a sense, don't give up.
Yeah, never.
I love that. All right. Well, normally we would say, well, where can people find you? Like social media, websites and stuff like
Hopefully
that?
nowhere.
Yes. We had a conversation where my research for you was quite difficult because your entire enterprise, in a sense, is somewhat.
Yeah. So let me be more transparent about that.
Fair
right.
enough.
So for everyone who is listening, it's not because I'm that special or wonderful. I've had for 30, 40 years, I had this weird thing where I didn't want anyone to know who I was. I didn't have like a pathology around it. It wasn't like a big deal.
Yeah.
In moments, I love that people know who I am.
Yeah.
I love that. Right. But it really came down to this. Because I felt this deep imposter's complex
Oh.
my whole life, where I was like, oh, so many people view me as being all like very successful. I've had a very successful investment career. I've been an investor. I've built, helped build great companies. I'm building my own now. We've got this hospitality company. We've, produced films and done all this different stuff. I've been accomplished in jiu-jitsu, but except for jiu-jitsu, I've never felt comfortable being recognized for any of it because I felt so inauthentic.
Yeah.
Because I felt so much that I was just an imposter or a fraud.
Right.
And the better that I did, the more I wanted to hide from it. And so for decades, I was just like, I don't want to do the podcast.
Yeah.
I don't want to be interviewed. I don't want to be in the magazine, or I don't want people to really know me or talk about me. I want to scrub myself from the internet.
Yeah.
Right? I scrubbed almost every jiu-jitsu match, apparently. There's one out there. I scrubbed almost everything I can from the internet. And only now in the last 5 or 6 years have I gotten to the point where I'm like, oh, I now know why I didn't want to be known.
Yeah.
Why? Because I was so uncomfortable being the guy.
Yeah.
I always loved being the guy behind the guy. Now I'm a lot more comfortable. So people want to find me. I mean, I don't know if they're going to care, but I have a company called Ionic Partners.
Yeah.
That's ionicpartners.com. We buy enterprise software companies. We transform them. It's a technology investment firm. We've got separately, I've got a hospitality group in Los Angeles that 2 of my partners founded that I'm deeply involved with, called the H-Wood Group. We've got a media arm there called H-Wood Media. I founded a number of jiu-jitsu academies, but the biggest one that I was involved with is Gracie Maita Austin.
Yep.
Which you're affiliated with, and Tim Kennedy's affiliated with here in Austin. So if people want to train, certainly train there. From time to time I train elsewhere, but that is the academy that I started. But if you want to find me, it's there. I'm not on Instagram. I am on Facebook. I won't add you. But, I am on LinkedIn, but it's pretty easy to find me. But again, who knows if it's great shakes for anybody. If I can be helpful, I would love to be.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm just honored to be one of the many guests included on your podcast. So thanks for having me, man.
It's been my honor, and the information, especially the sincerity with which you shared the information, was awesome. Well, very valuable to me. Like a lot. I mean, again, I can tell you right now, to add a 5th piece to that hierarchy for me that's not an easy thing. But it was so like, duh. As soon as you mentioned it, as soon as you brought it up, as soon as you shared why, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I hadn't done that.
Oh, so me too. Let's go find some fun things to do.
Damn straight. All right, folks. Well, that's a wrap. I want to thank you, Donald, for coming on the show. Thank you to our audience for tuning in. Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to the men and women holding the line. Check out all our previous podcasts by visiting bulletproofworkshop.com. Learn more about me and training opportunities by visiting tridentconcepts.com. Until then, I'm Jeff Gonzalez. You're listening to the Bulletproof Workshop podcast. Stay safe or be dangerous.